a person in a big Russian culture was formed. And this is something that is in consciousness. We should not have any illusions about this. And here we should talk about total evil and comparative evil and how the culture influences them. So, yes, we can continue our discussion. We still have time. Jimmy, you had a question, I think. Yes, you can.
Let's go.
Thank you,
It will be a question kind of mixed with a comment. So basically, it's great that you touched upon the Russian culture and actually the contradictions, the seeming contradictions contained within the Russian culture, and what leads to a lot of confusion and actually misunderstanding again in the West. The thing is, Russian culture, unlike German culture, French culture, or British culture, or in general European culture, Russian culture is not the culture of the Russian people. When we speak of German culture or French culture, we know that these cultures originated from the depths of the people. They have these cultures, they have their roots and their corresponding peoples. However, Russian culture, what is termed as Russian culture, it's essentially an artificial imposition in the 18th and 19th centuries. Actually, it's mostly a German creation. What is termed as Russian culture is actually basically a German creation during Petrin Russia, which was superimposed on an alien population in the 18th and 19th centuries, and actually which was completely destroyed after the Bolshevik Revolution. Basically, one could even say that the Soviet period and now the current period of the Putinist Russia indicates, it heralds the period of Russia actually returning to its true self. Basically, the Russia of Chekhov, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, or Russian ballet actually is an artificial Russia, it's a pseudomorphosis. Well, of course, those, let's say, the authors, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and others, okay, they were Russians, but they existed within the framework created by German settlers in the Russian Empire. So they made all their creations within that framework. Once those Germans either were killed or were kicked out of Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution, then this culture also disappeared, was also destroyed. So maybe in the future, Russian people, or people of the post-Russian states, will have time, will create their own unique, their natural cultures that belong to them, that will grow from the depths of their own people, but currently it's not the case. So that's the thing.
Was there other comment?
Yes, I agree. Спасибо, я согласен, что если мы переводим в эту плоскость разговор, то вообще-то Бердяев, который исследовал очень много других позиций, можно спорить, но он вообще говорил, что русская идея – это не идея культуры. Не идея культуры. Русская идея – это не идея культуры. Можно дальше продолжать, но я думаю, что у нас просто нет времени развивать эту тему, там очень все четко сказано, во-первых. Во-вторых, если говорить об этой культуре, совершенно верно. Это, собственно говоря, культура принадлежит определенному слою просвещенного, во-первых, авторам, а во-вторых, определенному слою просвещенному сословию. Но это не культура, ее нельзя.
Но при этом непросвещенное сословие с удовольствием это ловит, и в чем объясняется легко феномен и того быдла-шансончика 90-х, например, как культурного феномена, и современного этого рэпера-шамана. Это я...
Okay, let me translate. I fully agree with you, because as Berdyaev told that Russian idea is not Russian culture. Because Russian culture may belong to some layer of population, layer of authors, but it does not represent the culture on the whole. Okay, do we have any other questions, comments?
Well, I would also like to add a few things, maybe very brief. In my opinion, the problem with the Russian culture, including the Russian literature, is not the fact that, as you said, it represents a human being, that it was formed under horrible circumstances. The problem is actually the political aspect of it and the propaganda of militarism and imperialism that can very clearly be read in everybody from Pushkin to Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. And to answer my mate over there, I do think that the Russian culture does represent at least the thinking of a Russian person very much. It was, even during the Tsarist times, it was floating in the air, all that stuff. And the Soviet authorities did very much to take that normal human being, the regular human being, the worker and the peasant, and to force that culture upon them. And as we have seen from the 70 years of the Soviet experiment, it hasn't helped at all. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move to the next speaker. Sergej Sumlenny is founder and managing director of the European Resilience Initiative Center, as well as director at the Heinrich Böll Foundation Bureau in Kyiv. And we would like to hear your comments and about denazification and derussification. Sergej, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to speak on such important topic. Thank you so much for this opportunity and this privilege. I would like just to distance myself from the idea that the Nazi regime in Germany allegedly was so good in creating like new technological or other achievements. In fact, they have not. Like they have massively stolen what the Weimar Republic has started to build. For example, the famous highways. The program was started by the Weimar Republic. The Nazis have just hijacked it, exactly as Putin hijacked like several achievements of the more or less democratic government before him. But these are the details of our criminal history in Germany, I would say. Well, I would focus in my presentation on the aspects of how the possible dissolution of the Russian Empire, which is now being called Russian Federation, which is of course not, it's not federation, how it can be seen from the perspective of the German elites, of the German government, German society, media, etc. And we need to, when we talk about it, like we need to understand that all the talks about the collapse of the Russian Federation are being seen through the German eyes either as bullshit or a very dangerous event. So it should be either ignored or prevented. You choose what is better for you. The German political elite didn't see Ukraine for a longer time a country, a sovereign country with 30 years of independence only in the last decades, and the first sovereign proclamation of its independence, and the embassy in Berlin, by the way, close to the central railway station, about 1 mile from where we're sitting. In 1918, it was the first Ukrainian embassy in Germany, and still the German elites rejected or denied the sovereignty of Ukraine, effectively preferring to talk about Ukraine with Russia and only with Russia, and not only Ukraine. If we remember the German political expression and formula, Russia is our neighbor, which has been pronounced regularly in Berlin until recently, until actually February 22. And every time when a German politician told to me Russia is our neighbor, I wanted to present him a geographic map, or at least to ask him what map is he using. Maybe it's a map from the 17th September 1939, which is a bit outdated. So if the German political elites ignored the existence of Ukraine as a sovereign actor, what do you want to have regarding the sovereign nations of Russia? The Russia's collapse is being seen, if it happens, as a huge danger. You can now unfold all the possible problems of fears, proliferation of nuclear weapons, civil war, economic collapse, spread of China's influence, you name it. And the way to go out of the misery where we landed now with the full-scale war in Europe and with hundreds of thousands of killed people is, from the German perspective, a creation of democratic and free Russia. No collapse, just democratic Russia, regime change. Maybe some good people come to power as Navalny, or maybe even not so good. I don't say that Navalny is my cup of tea, but he's, of course, from the German perspective, he's an angel and a hero, and a white knight, or maybe a black knight like Mishustin or someone. The most important part is not Putin. You can see it even in the best think tanks in Berlin, like you call them, like what can be the best pro-Ukrainian think tank in Berlin? It's maybe Libmod, Liberale Moderne, like fighters and champions for the Ukrainian sovereignty and rights, and they're doing a good job in what they do in Ukraine. But if you look at what they do on the direction of Russia, you see an article of Vladimir Milov is being published in a full scale, and Vladimir Milov literally writes in his article that within the last 30 years there was no attempt by the Russian state to erase ethnical identities of the Russian nations. Just today I've got a message from Bashkortostan as one shop was forbidden, it was prohibited for them to have their sign in Bashkir language, because it's Bashkir language. There was a violation, of course, of Russian laws, because Bashkir is an official language in Bashkortostan, but no, it wasn't possible. So Russia has been seen here, exactly as has been said, Russia has been seen as a positive loaded structure with rich culture, and of course the culture artifacts of the colonized nation have been appropriated by the Russian state and being presented as Russian. You start from Malevich, you end with with Quincy. We have seen it in the mass robbery and pillage of Ukrainian museums by the Russian occupation forces. And of course, when the Ukrainian activists and protesters try to prevent a performance by Anna Netrebko, who was a fierce supporter of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, starting from 2014 and post with the flag of so-called Novorossiya, which was a flag of occupation forces in Ukraine. It faces no understanding from the German public because it's a culture, and culture is outside of beyond politics, beyond political tensions, allegedly. And you cannot sell this idea to the German society that some classic singer may not perform, or classic conductor or pianist like Gergiev or Matsuyev or others, especially when it's about the classical music and the classical singing and the classical art, because it is being used as an unbreakable armor against any accusation. Because when you sing Italian opera, you cannot be a bad person. Okay, so from the German perspective, the German political elites do not see any actors who could challenge Russian hegemony on the landscape, on the territory of current Russian Federation. They don't see any need to support them, and they don't see this possible development. Even if they start to think about it, they don't see it as something which can be at least neutral. They see it as a danger. Does it mean that there is no hope? Of course not. Exactly like today, in 1985, no one in the West, maybe besides of Ukrainian diaspora, believed in their chance that the Soviet Union would collapse. And I don't want to repeat the story of Chicken Kyiv speech by the US President Bush, but did it mean that the moment when the collapse happened, the Western countries denied the recognition of the free nations there? As soon as the facts will be created, there will be, of course, no fighting back from the Western nations, and in particular from Germany. Of course, we can imagine like some complications. We can imagine that, let me say, the influence in some regions of Russia can be changed by China, etc. All standard developments, but there will be no attempt of the Western nations to prevent it or to deny it. So where can the forces be focused? Like, where should we apply the leverage to move this discussion and this situation to the direction we would prefer to have, so democratization of Russia by the collapse of the Russian imperialistic structures? I would say effectively any help for the Ukrainian army is a step in the right direction, because the destiny of Russia is being decided on the battlefield in Ukraine. Not on the sanctions battlefield, despite the fact that the sanctions could be useful and good. Not on the battlefield of the United Nations. Will Russia continue to be a member of the Security Council or not? It is, of course, it would be great if Russia would be kicked out the UNSC, but it will not be the decisive moment. The decisive moment will be when the Ukrainian soldier will raise the Ukrainian flag in Yalta. And what happens after that in Russia? How much of Vladimir Putin's image will crack after that? And that's why any focusing on the Russian of the free people of Russia who fight within the Ukrainian army, even if they are very small units like platoons or battalions, Bashkirs, Tatars, Chechens. The Chechen battalion is very active in Ukraine, but they need more. So that would create the understanding, that will help the understanding to be spread that these nations, they have their autonomy or sovereignty and their own will to act. This will automatically get into the media. And of course, like the destiny is being decided on the battlefield, and you will see how the moment when Russia collapses, everyone who is talking now about how it's impossible will suddenly turn into the best friends of the idea of creating of many states on the Russian territory, and say how great it is, exactly as there are a lot of people now in political Berlin who are suddenly turned into great Ukrainian supporters, although until February 22 they were strictly opposing any delivery of weapons to Ukraine. And the last thing which I would like to quote regarding the Russian culture, it's actually one of my favorite verses of a Russian poet, Tuchev, who served as a diplomat of Russian Empire in Baden-Württemberg, in one of the kingdoms, now region of Germany in southwest. And he is the guy who created this iconic call to not to try to understand Russia, but to believe in Russia. To this Russian diplomat, high-rank Russian diplomat, and a famous Russian classical poet, wrote in 1948, in the age of European revolutions and liberation movements, he wrote a verse which he named Russian Geography. And it is not what you hear in German small talks. Moscow and Petersburg and Constantinople, they are three holy capitals of Russian kingdom. But where are the borders of it? Northwards, eastwards, southwards and westwards. Russia has 7 internal seas and 7 great rivers. From the Nile to the Neva, from the Elbe to China, from the Volga to the Euphrates, from the Ganges to the Danube, it is all the Russian kingdom. And as the Holy Spirit and the prophet Daniel